Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I am a writer, singer, lover of books, and today I'm going to share with you 10 classic books that I think are very easy to read as somebody who has unmedicated ADHD. First, I'm going to start with Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. This takes place in Australia in the year 1900. It is a group of boarding school girls who are able to take this field trip to have a picnic at Hanging Rock. On the picnic, I believe it's 3 girls and one of their teachers goes missing. And it's very interesting. It's kind of the fallout of that, and it kind of leaves the end up to interpretation for the reader, and makes it feel a little bit sinister. I was gripped through this the whole way, and I think that if you're just starting with classics, this is a very easy one to get into. Next we have The Stranger by Albert Camus. Now this is not a revolutionary pick. Everybody knows this is a great book, but if you're just starting and you haven't read it, I would definitely recommend it. It's super thin. On the back it says it's an ordinary man who unwittingly gets drawn into senseless murder on a sun-drenched Algerian beach. So the plot is interesting, but I just loved getting into his mindset. It's very philosophical. You'll see how this main character, he did not invest anything into his personal relationships, romantic or otherwise, and then he wonders why he feels like there's no meaning in the world. And my interpretation is that, you know, the way we treat each other is the only thing that matters. So it's very interesting to kind of like see his mindset, see how he kind of like starts in the beginning and then gets a little crazier at the end. I would highly recommend this book. There's a reason it's classic, and I think if you're just getting started, it's not daunting. You'll love it. Next is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I see a lot of Little Women on lists like these, and this is what I wished Little Women was. For me, Little Women was not very easy to read. It just felt boring. It felt way too long. And that was a children's book, and I believe this is also a children's book, although it's like a regular novel. And it's very whimsical. It's this little girl who's an orphan. She has this very sad life, and she goes to live with her uncle and discovers this secret garden. And it's not a magic garden, but it's kind of the way that it makes her feel like the nature and the blooming can almost appear magical. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book that I would definitely recommend. Next we have A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. I've only read maybe 3 Hemingway books, and this one was my favorite. This is nonfiction, which normally I do not like nonfiction, but A Movable Feast he's referring to Paris. So it's his time in Paris, with other writers like Gertrude Stein and F. Scott Fitzgerald, who I love. And it's really interesting to see how these writers, especially if you are interested in writing or even if you're just interested in reading, because I loved seeing his friendship with Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald, and what Paris was like in the 20s when he was writing these beautiful novels. Next book has a disclaimer that it's troublesome, the content matter is disgusting, and only read it if you can handle it. Next is Lolita. It is a great book, even though it's disturbing. So if you can't handle the subject matter, don't. I was definitely afraid to read this because I thought it was going to be like sexy. I thought that was like based on what I'd heard of the romanticization of Lolita, I thought it was like, oh, like this is this like sexy relationship between a girl and a little girl and a man, and that's not at all what I gathered from this. Regardless, it's still disturbing. So if you're not capable of reading that, I would not. But it definitely shows and hammers home that this man, Humbert, is disgusting. He's ruined this girl's life. And it's beautifully written. So the story is gripping. You will be, if nonetheless, just disgustedly reading it the whole way through. Like you can't put it down because you're like, what? But you will finish it. And I do just want to hammer home that this is not a book to be romanticized. Next is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is very easy to read. Again, super thin. And you'll feel very intelligent reading it because the whole thing is like a metaphor for the political landscape and capitalism. So you will feel smart, but it's also incredibly easy to understand. There's nothing that's going to go over your head with this. You know exactly what the animals mean. If you don't know what this is about, it is about a group of farm animals who rebel against their owner, like the humans that own them. And then, of course, things can't work without like a societal system being in place. So then they were unhappy that the humans were treating them in a certain way, but then they had to elect somebody so that things would get done. Cycle of power going to people's head, people manipulating their power, using their power. But again, easy to read. You're going to understand it. It's not like the type of language that would confuse you. Next is one of my favorites, although these are all on my favorites list. Next is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is not considered a memoir. It is considered fiction, but if you know anything about Sylvia Plath's life, it's a memoir. This is about a girl named Esther who, she's smart and gifted, but she feels burnt out. She worries about making these right choices, worries about making something of herself. If you know anything about this book, it is likely the fig tree analogy, which I feel like so many people can relate to. I just grabbed my other copy because this is the one I've read and highlighted. If you have not heard the fig tree analogy, today is your lucky day. Okay, so she says, I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G. the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. And another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind of which of those figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. Brilliant book. Sylvia Plath was brilliant. Her living in New York and then like the mental illnesses that she suffered with, really easy to read, really beautiful to read, and I would definitely recommend it. Next is Perfume, the Story of a Murderer. This is a much darker book than the others. It takes place in the 1800s in France, and it is the story of a man who has an incredibly strong sense of smell. And so some things make him sick because it's so much stronger to him than it is other people. But basically he becomes infatuated with the scent of a young virgin, and it's all he do to capture that scent forever. And it's just very interesting the way that it was written. It'll definitely keep you hooked the whole time, trying to figure out what's going to happen. And the next two are also not revolutionary. You've probably heard of them before, and with good reason. This is The Picture of Dorian Gray. The Picture of Dorian Gray is brilliant. This copy looks a little thicker because it's got, I think, one of his short stories in the end as well, so it's not normally this thick. But The Picture of Dorian Gray is about this man who is young and beautiful and makes sort of a deal with the devil where he gets to stay young and beautiful. They paint his portrait, and only the portrait will age, not him. As he goes through life with this striking beauty, he becomes more rotten on the inside, and that causes the portrait to age quicker. It's a great book. Oscar Wilde is brilliant. And last, but certainly not least, certainly the best, I had to do it. I had to do it. It's The Great Gatsby. It's The Great Gatsby. But there's a reason this is on everybody's list. First of all, it's teeny tiny. And F. Scott Fitzgerald makes every word count. Again, like Oscar Wilde, brilliant writer, beautiful writer. This will keep you hooked, if only because the words are captivating, because he does such a good job at painting a picture, at using words to create poetry, even though it's a novel and not poetry. I think everybody knows the story of The Great Gatsby, at least, through, if you were supposed to read it in English class and you didn't, but you heard your teacher talk about it, or if you watched the movie. But it's got the glitz and glamour of America in the 1920s. It has murder, it has love, it has money, it has everything. And I could not love this book more. I could not love this book. This is the book that made me fall in love with reading. As somebody with ADHD, my attention span can be really short, and unless you find a book that really like grips you, you can think like reading is boring. But then when I read this for the first time, it's been many times since, I fell in love. Again, you can see like every page looks, oh, my copy is literally falling apart because I love it so much. Also, just wanted to add that I am a F. Scott Fitzgerald apologist till the day that I die. I do not believe he plagiarized this from his wife Zelda. And I've done a lot of research on the subject. I am also a feminist. So if there were evidence that that was the case, I would be screaming it from the rooftops. But there's not. F. Scott wrote this, and he was inspired by Zelda because she was a cool person. But they were both mentally unstable and crazy and bad people probably, but both very talented. Okay, that was my list. I hope you enjoyed my list of 10 classic novels that are easy to read as somebody with unmedicated ADHD.